students are very scared when they get told you won't be graduating, you won't get your degree, and we certainly saw that. But the students that were organized and said, no, like, I'm not guilty, I'm not sorry, what I did was right, and if they were consistent and very public about that, there were many, many instances of those charges getting dropped and dismissed.
Welcome to Fight Back Radio, a production of fightbacknews.org, taking you to the heart of the people's struggle. I'm your host, Richard Berg, and today we're going to talk about the student movement in the United States. Our guest is Erin Boyle, who's the vice president of the National Students for Democratic Society, or SDS, new SDS, and we're going to talk to her about what's going on in the student movement and what has been going on. Since this interview was recorded, though, I mean, Donald Trump is, boy, what kind of guy do we have as president of the United States? But there's some sort of crazy headline every single day, and it would just make you roll your eyes if it didn't make you cry. Real people are suffering for these kind of things. Fight Back News comes out every 2 weeks, and we've been doing that for almost 3 years on a regular basis. We haven't missed a shot, but every 2 weeks is not daily news, so it's hard for us to keep on top of stuff that way. But as I'm recording right now, for example, Israel has broken the truce and started bombing Gaza again, and hundreds of people have died, maybe thousands by the time this is released, I'm not sure. Linda McMahon is now the head of the Department of Education and has vowed to destroy that and is doing her best to. Federal workers are getting laid off like crazy. Trump had a blow up that might have been comical with the Ukrainian president. So anyways, there's lots going on and probably even more. But the important thing is that all of these devastations, that we need to unite in a broad front against Donald Trump, and that's the students are part of that front. They've been in leadership of it. They've created a spark for the rest of the movement. We saw that last spring with the Palestine issue, and Erin's going to talk about that in the interview. So rather than tell you what's in the interview, why don't you listen for yourself? Here's Vice President of Students for Democratic Society, Erin Boyle. So today we're going to be talking about the student movement and the movement for justice as it is across the country. And we're here with Erin Boyle, who's the Vice President of Students for Democratic Society, the organization that's was so popular and big during the anti-Vietnam War movement, and was the main student organization in the country. And then it died out in the aftermath of Vietnam, but was refounded and today is one of the most dynamic student organizations in the country. And so welcome to Fight Back Radio, Erin.
Very happy to be here.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you. I want to dig right into it. So, we last spring, the student movement captured the imaginations of people around the country, around the world, I think, as we were witnessing a genocide being played out on TV right in front of our eyes. Students were amongst the first to take action and to do it in a dynamic and dramatic way. And this led to, in the spring of last year, encampments that happened across the country. And your organization, the Students for Democratic Society, or SDS, was central to that. Can you talk a little bit about, what these encampments were and, where they were, why you did it, how that came to be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the height of student activism last spring was undoubtedly in April and May with these encampments, which kicked off inspired by Columbia University, the Students for Justice in Palestine chapter there. And after witnessing the university administration, university police from NYPD, I believe, attempt to very violently disrupt their peaceful encampment, Students set up encampments of their own. I think we reached something like 60 or so across the country over those next 2 months. But I think it's important to talk about what led up to that point. Like, how did the students at Columbia get to that point? And it was, from months of organizing that admin took that sort of response, had that sort of repression. And what the students at Columbia were doing, what that SJP chapter was doing, was something that students across the country were doing in a response to what we were seeing unfold, not beginning on October 7th, but certainly escalating in response to October 7th. Kind of a roundabout way of saying that.
So in October 7th was the date of the Al-Aqsa, am I saying this right? Al-Aqsa flood, when the Palestinians actually did like a jailbreak in some ways from Gaza, where they were locked in, and it started the war, which turned into just a genocide, I think. But yes, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, no, and young people, witnessed a lot through their phones, through social media, what was happening to the people of Gaza and to the people of Palestine. And I think that this was the first time that a lot of people became aware of what was happening in Palestine. And I think more specifically, our government's response to it. So in October 26th, right, just several weeks after that, there was a national walkout led by Students for Justice in Palestine, SDS we co-sponsored, where thousands of students walked out of their classes to say, like, end U.S. aid to Israel now, because we saw that already, right off the bat, our country was sending an additional, because we already send them a lot of military aid, an additional, billions of dollars, and that was directly contributing to the bombing and the ethnic cleansing of the people of Palestine. I organize locally with the chapter at UIC. We have an amazing...
So it's University of Illinois at Chicago?
Yes, University of Illinois at Chicago. We have an amazing Students for Justice in Palestine there. I believe it's one of the oldest in the country. Chicago has one of the largest Palestinian diaspora populations in the entirety of the U.S. And our SJP chapter has an amazing support of alumni and community members. Anyway, we led a walkout of like hundreds of students October 26th. And within, I think, 3 days, Congress passed a resolution condemning pro-Palestine student protest, saying, and it was passed unanimously, saying that students who are protesting, in favor of Palestine are supporting terrorism. And I think ever since then, it kicked off a lot of chapters going ahead with divestment efforts. In February, we had our Milwaukee chapter occupied a building and with, demands of divestment. And I know in Chicago, I think it was November, they occupied a building there, I think their admissions office. And, that SDS, SJP, all sorts of other student groups. So it's kind of like scattered, not super coordinated. And then I think in April with that Columbia encampment and the visible, outrageous repression, it was just totally not to scale with what was happening. That really kicked off the encampments. And I say that to say that I think that the groundwork was laid by a lot of student organizers to see that call and immediately, pick it up.
So it was an escalation then, it seems.
Yes.
Like, so people...
exactly, planned escalation.
Yeah, so people responded quickly, but there was education, there was walkouts, occupations, then encampment. Can you talk a little bit and remind our listeners what happened at Columbia, what the repression actually looked like there?
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with all of the details. I will say that I'm pretty sure I'm correct about this, but the SJP there had been banned several months ago, and the Jewish Voices for Peace. Both of those student organizations had been banned as a result of like protests, sit-ins, maybe walkouts, and even, you know, they might have been officially banned. That didn't really stop their organizing. And I think that that was what led them to choose an escalation. So they set up a peaceful encampment on their university lawn, which just looked like students setting up tents on the campus that they pay to go to. And in response to that, the university sent in police to tear down those tents and attempt to block off the gates to the campus to stop supporters from coming and keeping the encampment going. And they failed in that initially. There were many arrests that were made, but many students were able to stay. Many community supporters, other students were able to come and keep the encampment going.
So it seems like things were, you know, uneven initially, and you know, some campuses were more advanced than others in terms of taking actions or being able to organize. And then, you know, organizationally, you know, the SJP and this SDS, or Students for Democratic Society, seem to be amongst the main national organizations coordinating. But there was also lots of individual organizations that were popping up. I know my niece got arrested here in Chicago with the Art Institute of Chicago. And she was going to Columbia College, not to be confused with Columbia University in New York. And you know, they actually worked together, those two schools. But yeah, I mean, it was different things happening. What did it look like for you know, SDS nationally at that time, trying to coordinate all this or provide support, or what was going on with your organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think several things. We had a webinar that we did. I think maybe something just like a week or 2 weeks in that we put together. Students were participating from their tents on their encampments, just kind of giving tips about, okay, these are some strategies that are working. These are some strategies that didn't. And that was attended by a lot of students, you know, that weren't in SDS. Because yes, it's totally correct to say that young people, whether they were organized or not, whether these were brand new organizations, like people wanted to participate in this. People felt really strongly and still do that, you know, what is happening in Palestine is unacceptable, that we see our university's direct financial complicity in that, and that we have a duty to do all we can to put a stop to it. So I was, before I became vice president, which was a newer development, I was chairing the New Areas Committee of SDS, where I was seeing directly all of the signups that we were getting from students, whether they be university students, high school students, who were seeing what was happening and wanted to do what they could to become a part of it. So I had a lot of very interesting phone calls with students who were like, yeah, we have the tents, like we're ready, like we want to be a part of this. And I would try to do what I could, or like connect them with other people who had more experience. And yeah, like the boom of signups that we saw in like April and May has actually been sustained throughout the summer, the fall semester, and now, you know, the spring semester. So I think that, you know, the student intifada has just like raised the level of consciousness for young people across this country and what's possible for them to do on their campuses.
Yeah, I mean, so I want to talk a little bit about the repression, and you know, this was Joe Biden was president of the United States at this time, and so you know, a lot of us, including me, are concerned and fearful possibly about repression under Trump. But this was, you know, we saw repression under Biden, and you know, a Zionist backlash from the rulers of our country. And, you know, I want to talk a little bit about, you know, New Orleans and what happened there, because, you know, your chapter, your New Orleans SDS people were very involved in the repression that went on there. Could you give people a little bit of rundown of what happened with the students in New Orleans, and what came of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we have 3 chapters in New Orleans, one at the University of Tulane, University of Loyola, and University of New Orleans. And I believe it was just Tulane and Loyola held a joint encampment. And the level of repression that they faced was insane. I think they were the only chapter of ours that had police on horses try to kind of break their way into the encampment. They actually set up a makeshift metal watchtower the admin constructed that cost hundreds of dollars to better surveil what was happening, and brutal, violent arrests. And the following summer, it was actually the first instance of pro-Palestine student protesters having to go to trial. I think there were about 12 or 14 or so of them. And we had a big win that was made possible only by the students and the community members, fighting back against these bogus charges for what was peaceful protest. Those charges were dismissed. They were all thrown out by the judge.
They were serious charges, though.
Yes, they were serious charges.
They were felonies, I think. Am I right? Or
I'm not completely sure. They could have been, but yeah, they were very serious charges, and they were dismissed by the judge.
Okay, well that's a victory then.
Yeah,
and I mean, in the same way we saw uneven development, the repression, it seems to me, was uneven as well. I mean, it was. I thought, initially the Congress called in these presidents from MIT and University of Pennsylvania and Harvard, I think, and ended up tried to grill them about why did they allow free speech or what they would say is terrorism speech, and really set a tone for across the country. But here in Chicago, we saw, we saw arrests at the Art Institute, but then, the encampments at Northwestern, they actually had some negotiations. University of Chicago, they tried to prevent people from graduating. Mm-hmm. And so there was different, and I'm sure, different things happened across the country, but it didn't happen in isolation. The Zionists were pushing hard in certain sections of the people that run our country were pushing hard for severe repression, and then on the other side, the community and the students got support. I think not just maybe you can speak to that a little bit about the support students got even outside the campus. Yeah,
I think by far the most successful encampments were made possible by community support. Whether those be parents or just people within the community, people from churches, from mosques, coming, bringing food, bringing materials. I was at the DePaul encampment, and that was, started by the Students for Justice in Palestine there, but was supported by U.S. Palestinian Community Network, USPCN, and other community organizations that really, made those encampments, really uplifted the students in that respect. And if the repression, resulted in charges on the students, the community members, remained there and helped them fight the charges, because we certainly found that the only way to get those charges dropped was to fight them. I mean, it sounds obvious when you say it, but students are very scared when they get told you won't be graduating, you won't get your degree, and we certainly saw that. But the students that, were organized and said, no, I'm not guilty, I'm not sorry, what I did was right, and if they were consistent and very public about that, there were many, many instances of those charges getting dropped and dismissed.
No, I think it's counterintuitive in some ways because you got in a little bit of trouble, or maybe a lot of trouble, for being an activist, and so tell me if I'm wrong here. What you're saying is that when you get in trouble, you should be more active or more activism. Yeah. That's what'll get you out of trouble, not putting your head in the sand.
We should be public because like you're peacefully protesting. You're on the right side of history. Students have nothing to be ashamed of for standing with the people of Palestine or whatever, whatever their activism might be around. And in SDS, we learned that before the student intifada. Let's see, was it just a year before when we did a national defense campaign for the Tampa 5, who listeners of Fight Back Radio are aware of, but 5 protesters from the University of South Florida and Tampa Bay who were peacefully protesting the shutting down of the diversity office on their campus. They were doing a peaceful protest, and the campus police very violently tore it apart, threw the student protesters on the ground, and then charged the students with felonies. And we fought for, I think it took like 6-9 months across the country. We had several rallies in Chicago, very far away from Florida, where we knew that it was important to make the case as public as possible, to show out in the open to the public that this was like political repression, that, they were fully within their First Amendment right, and that the charges were wrong, and they were dropped. I mean, they were facing something like 10 years in prison, these, peaceful protesters. But we made such a big deal of it. We were very loud about it, and they dropped them. Yeah,
no, I think that's good. I mean, you mentioned we do have a Fight Back Radio episode where we interviewed Gia Davia, who was one of the Tampa 5, and we'll put it in the show notes, but I'll encourage Fight Back Radio listeners to go back and listen to that episode and get the details at the time, that we were fighting the charges that were against Gia and the other 4 students at the University of South Florida. Mm-hmm. But I think this is instructive, though, because I want to actually dig into move from the last year in the Biden administration, and since then Donald Trump has become president of the United States. He has promised even more repression, and I think Florida and the University of South Florida is instructive because, under Ron DeSantis, we've seen some of this already on the state level, where they've tried to block diversity, equity, inclusion, which is what I think that protest was about, where they were arrested. And so can you talk a little bit about some of the things maybe that we've seen in Florida and other chapters in the South, maybe Texas, and over the last few years. And our last episode, or the one before on Fight Back Radio, we talked about trans repression, and we had our guest was from Florida as well, and talked about that, hey, we've been seeing this for a little bit here. What we're likely to see with Trump, or what we've seen in with Governor Abbott in Texas, or Governor DeSantis in Florida. Yeah, I mean, it's nothing new. As long as I've been in SDS, we've been defending diversity programs and ethnic studies, genders and women's studies, support for LGBTQ students, all of those things. Yes, you're correct. Like the Tampa 5, they were protesting the closing of their diversity office on their campus. And that same year, within a matter of months, like they had a similar piece of legislation get pushed through Texas. And I will say, like, even before the Trump administration, these offices might have been getting banned in the South and in certain states, but even in non-red states and blue states, we were seeing these programs get systematically underfunded. But what we're seeing with the Trump administration is just a full-out attack on all of these important,
parts of our education. I mean, a full-out attack on the Department of Education as a whole. Like, he is threatening to close it, which not only would, decimate federal funding for these like diversity programs and the things I've named, but also would just put student loans and support for students to attend college, just completely obliterate all of it.
So we're seeing now some of these attacks that DeSantis or Abbott did, they're happening across everywhere.
Nationwide
Chicago
scale.
Here, or New York, Los Angeles, wherever there's a university, or even outside of the university for that matter. And I know SDS has launched a national campaign around education. Can you talk a little bit about that campaign and the kinds of things that your chapters are doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, if I had to sort of summarize it, because Trump's attacks on education are pretty broad and sweeping. Basically, students are demanding that their universities do not comply with Trump's orders, whether that be, shutting down their diversity programs. We say fund your diversity programs, whether that be, taking down their gender inclusive housing. We say don't do that. Support LGBTQ students, support women's and reproductive health care on your campuses. And I think most importantly, because this has really been one of the primary attacks on Trump, do not comply with Trump's orders around deportations. I think a lot of what our campuses are doing, like currently, are running sanctuary campus demands, where we, demand that our universities do not comply with ICE, that they don't hand over their students' information to ICE, because there's varying levels of, commitments from universities. We're seeing a lot of universities that might say that they're sanctuary city, or that they're sanctuary campuses, but they're still, when you read the fine print of what these policies are, they're still going to be collaborating with ICE. They might say, we don't want this, our faculty to have contact with ICE, but if your police are having contact with ICE and you're still allowing them to go about their, illegal investigation, that's still collaborating. So, we're just expecting our universities to defy those orders.
Okay. And so if you could talk a little bit about, the things that students are doing. We're recording this in late February in Chicago, and I know this week you guys have walkouts planned. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, mm-hmm. and what that's looking like, and also what people are doing around the country around immigration issues to try to get their universities to either be really sanctuary instead of fake sanctuary, or at least sanctuary at all, or what depending on what the situation is. Yeah,
I mean, basically, we're building that pressure to make our universities really safe spaces, and we found that that won't happen on its own. It will only happen when students hold their universities accountable. So yeah, in a couple of days now, later this week, we're having a walkout at the University of Illinois at Chicago, with the main demands being that no deportations, ICE off campus. We want the university to make a greater commitment to the safety of their students, something that is so important at our university, which is the Hispanic Serving Institution, and HSI is on, very close to multiple Latino Chicano neighborhoods. We expect them to keep students safe. And yeah, this is part of a national week of action that's going to be happening across the country. There's going to be walkouts in Austin, Wayne State, protests and rallies in New York, Minnesota, Denver, all over the country, because, a big part of SDS's theory of change is our chapters have, specific campaigns with specific demands of their university, which are going to be different from campus to campus, but they're also a part of building a broader social movement on, these more broader policies. And that's why, like, the main demand across all of these is no deportations, because these wide sweeping, anti-immigrant policies that Trump is pushing through are affecting people's loved ones, their families, and young people won't stand for it. And we want to show that the majority of people in this country don't agree with these, racist and violent policies.
Yeah, no, that's good. I know here in Chicago, you've also reached out to high school students and to educators to try to get support for the walkouts. There's going to be walkouts at some high schools as well. But also, I want to talk about the diversity of tactics too, because you have one movement that's uniting, but people at different high schools and different universities are at different places. So some places can organize a walkout. Some might be doing other activities as they educate and unite the people in their schools. Could you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that question, because we've mostly been talking about really big things like encampments or walkouts, but that's certainly not like the day-to-day, month-to-month action for student organizers. The majority of what chapters are doing, especially as they're just building their work, things like teach-ins. We just had a teach-in at UIC around Panama, which was really important for us to do. The teach-ins banner drops. That's something that I always tell chapters that are just starting out. Good thing to do. Have an art build, make a beautiful banner together, and then hold it somewhere prominent on your campus. Use that as an opportunity to flyer, talk to students about what they're concerned about, or just like a speak out, which is like a baby version of a rally, where if you just have a couple of people write speeches ahead of time, you read them on your campus somewhere, all sorts of things like that. That's how you build your core, get familiar with your campus, get aware of what other organizations are there, that kind of thing.
So if I'm a student at some campus and whatever, there's a student group there or there's not, and I have questions about what do we do? How can we get this going? Or can we talk to somebody at SDS? Is that something you guys do, that you could somebody could reach out to you and say, hey, Erin, what do we do here? But this guy is doing that, and so it talks some stuff through a little bit.
Yes, yeah. You should go to newsds.org, and then you can click on a big button that says Join SDS, fill out a form where you just say your name, give us your phone number, if you have some things you want us to know about what you're interested in organizing around, and then we will have someone from our New Areas Committee give you a call and walk you through what is SDS, what are our points of unity, and then we have lots of resources that we give students to help them build chapters and help them build campaigns that, will win real things on their campus. Basically the process of it is you do that onboarding call where you get more information about the organization, whether you be chapter building or if you want to affiliate with us. We have chapters that are just, affiliated. After that onboarding call, then you get assigned a contact who is someone in National SDS that will be with you for several months until you feel like you're on your feet as a chapter. So we offer a lot of support.
Okay, so that's good. And so I encourage people listening to this podcast who are students to get involved. If there's an organization, get involved in it, and use SDS as a resource. Either affiliate with them or give them a call and fill out that form from newsds.org, and let's make it happen. We can join a student movement, make it bigger and stronger. I want to pivot a little bit to the fact Donald Trump has just appointed Linda McMahon, the wrestling executive, to be the Secretary of Education. So from pro wrestling to Secretary of Education. And both Linda McMahon and Donald Trump have promised to shut down the Department of Education. Is that a concern for you? And what does that mean for for students, whether they're university students or otherwise?
Yeah, it's a very, very big concern of mine, and I think it should be of everyone in this country. The Department of Education is the way that so many people are able to access education in this country. It's what makes our education more accessible and more equitable. If the Department of Education were to get shut down, it would decimate federal funding, it would decimate, student loans. It would end Title IX investigations, federal investigations within universities. And I think we can really see that this threat, which it looks like he wants to act on, is an attempt to really privatize education, to make it less accessible for working class people, for Black, Chicano, like for people who have historically not had access to education. And I also think it's important to remember, where these progressive federal policies within the Department of Education, where they come from. They come directly from the civil rights movement, from students who occupied, their buildings. I mean, yeah, all of those things, all of those like bigger federal policies, are there because of that. And when you as a student learn about your campus and your campus history, you'll find that the cultural center that you love, the classes that you love from like ethnic studies or genders and women's studies, those come directly from student activism. I mean, at UIC, our Latino Cultural Center is only made possible because of students who occupied our university hall in the early 1980s, that sort of thing. So even though it's really scary what Trump is saying, it's important to remember that, all of these things were won in the first place through action. And it's only through action that we can really defend it. And so no matter where you are in a red state, in a blue state, if that infrastructure has already been torn down, we have to fight to build it back up. And yeah.
Yeah, no,
that's my spiel.
No, I think that's right. I mean, it's, people, some people forget or never knew that, the universities used to be just for the elite. Mm-hmm. And, it was working class people, and especially not, people that were not white, whether they're Black, brown, or Asian, were excluded. In the elite universities, often you needed, a letter from a congressman or somebody prominent to get in, and they would only give it to you if you were, of a certain type. And, women were largely excluded. The historically Black colleges are there because people were not allowed into the white colleges. So it was through these struggles, as you mentioned, Erin, and I appreciate you bringing that up, that, workers and others were able to go to university. And we're seeing that get, when Trump says, let's make America great again, I think he means let's have white rich people be treated, have everything, and the rest of us be their servants. And so it's something we need to unite and fight back on. We saw the Supreme Court has rolled back affirmative action, and there's been a result to that already. There's less Black people, less women becoming doctors. There was just an article in the paper today I saw about this. And in other professions, and the enrollment at universities amongst working class and oppressed people is down as a ratio. And so we need to push back on that. And this is the next step. If you wipe out a department that is responsible for student loans, you can imagine who can still afford to go to college, whereas,
I don't know who could afford to go to college without student loans. It's so... Yeah,
well, college should be free. It should be like K through 12 for everybody. And, it's you mentioned the privatizing, too. It's happening across the board. So as a people, we need to unite and fight back. But I'm giving a speech. I should let my guests speak a little bit more here. All right. But yeah, maybe talk about that a little bit, about the some of the things that, whether it's diversity, equity, inclusion, or student loans, some of the things that are happening around, at the different campuses that SDS has around the country.
Yeah, I'll try to think of some specific examples. One of the first things that comes to mind is like a recent win that we had at in Tallahassee. Our SDS chapter, their university, came out to say that they were going to comply with Trump's bans on gender-affirming care, and as a result, they were going to get rid of their gender-inclusive housing that was a part of their dorms. The SDS chapter there was able to quickly, make a rally, make a petition, have people call into admin, and immediately the university, like within a couple of days, like reversed that decision. So I think that's a really great example that when students see that, a program or an initiative that students care deeply about is going to get taken down, they should immediately rally their classmates, their community in defense of it. And oftentimes you can get it reversed. It's been really interesting on these national council calls, just like the rate at which...
For SDS?
Yes, for SDS. We have these calls where people give reports of what's happening on their campuses. The rate at which these reversals are happening is quite insane. There's a big quantitative difference just since Trump has taken office. The number of diversity programs that are getting shut down, whole colleges, like at UIC, there's talks of taking away 3 colleges, the linguistics college being one of them, as a result of budget cuts and underfunding.
Okay, so I want to pivot a little bit here to talk to you a little bit about the nuts and bolts of student organizing and what it looks like. I was a student 200 years ago, maybe not quite that long, but things I'm sure have changed dramatically. Certainly there's probably more electronic stuff because there was none when I was there. But I want to ask you about, and we talked a little bit about this before we hit go on the record here, but about coalition building on the campuses. And how SDS operates and how you train your student leaders across the country and your experiences here in Chicago about operating in coalition with other organizations around all the issues we talked about today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, coalition building is incredibly important to organizing generally, but I think especially on a university campus, because you're in kind of a smaller space and you're sharing it with a lot of different organizations. And I think especially in this era right now of student organizing with these really broad attacks, across disciplines, across groups of people, there's a real opportunity and a need. It's a necessity to work with cultural groups, other activism groups. Different. It's not even just activism groups. Like cultural groups is a really great example there. I am really fortunate at UIC. We have an amazing progressive student coalition that's made up of our SDS chapter, Students for Justice in Palestine, Mexican Students to Aslan, Jewish Student Collective, Anak Bayan. I think I'm forgetting a couple, which I shouldn't. Just like really amazing work where we're able to tell each other about our campaigns and then come together and do bigger things together. And a word of advice that I often give student organizers when they're doing coalition work is just how important unity of action is when you're forming your coalition. It's really important to form it around action, like not just talking about theory or I think especially as students, we're so used to writing papers. Like I see a lot of coalitions that kind of begin as these like group chats where like they meet and they spend time like writing multiple page documents, planning, but it will never really get off the ground in that case. So it's really important when you're talking to student groups on your campus to give them like, you know, a real concrete actionable thing. So maybe that's like, yeah, we're going to have a rally to defend the firing of this professor, or we're going to have a rally because they're trying to take down this mural, like something like that. And working together from there. And I was just talking to like a musician friend of mine about this yesterday, and I made this kind of silly analogy about like, it's sort of like if you were to like get a band together, but you just have like meetings where you're just talking about what you'll sound like instead of like actually playing music together. And many people do that, but it's important to like really, you know, center action. And that's how, even if you have differences, those differences only get worked out when you're truly working together, supporting each other side by side.
No, I think that's good advice. I mean, I think theory is important, but it's theoretical unity is difficult, and often it's forged from you know, actually working together. Mm-hmm. And even where you have disunity, you know, you may not agree on whether to vote for Joe Biden or not, but you can maybe agree on we should protest for justice in Palestine or whatever the issue is. So that makes sense to me. So I want to ask you a little bit about, you know, I know you've been talking about your chapter at UIC and nationally, but I want to talk a little bit about you a little bit about how, you know, you weren't born a radical student activist.
No.
You know, so I want to ask, I know you're from Bloomington, Illinois is where you grew up. And I asked you earlier, your name's Erin Boyle, so I'm guessing you have some Irish blood in you. But how did you go from Irish American in Bloomington Normal to a national vice president and activist in Students for a Democratic Society? What made you? How did you come in contact with SDS, and what made you think, hey, these guys are something I want to be involved with?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess, you know, talking about like where I grew up, I mean, I think my parents made a really big difference. Both of my parents do legal aid work. And so I saw like firsthand, I grew up very much believing that like we have a social responsibility to help out, you know, the people around us. My dad talks about how like he does housing law because he was evicted from an apartment when he was on Social Security disability, and, you know, couldn't properly defend himself against like, you know, crooked landlords. So yeah, I was raised in such a way where I thought it was important to do whatever I could to help other people. And that's a really great idea, but I didn't really see like how I could actually act on that until I went to UIC, and a really good friend of mine started dating someone that was a part of the SDS chapter at UIC. And so then I started to see some events that were happening on campus. And frankly, the chapter at the time had a lot of men, and I was like, I'm not so sure about this. But then several months, like 4 months before the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the SDS chapter there had a protest saying to people like, this is probably going to happen. This is the way reproductive rights are under attack right now. And I attended that. And I was, you know, then in June, when the ruling did come out, I went with the chapter to a huge downtown protest in the city of Chicago. It had hundreds of people out. And I was really impressed that, you know, SDS had the foresight to see that coming. So I was like, that was what piqued my interest about SDS. So I was like, okay, I'm interested in this. I still didn't really have a grasp of like what student activism really was or what it could be until I attended the national convention at Kent State, Ohio, in October of 2022, I want to say. That totally blew my mind. And seeing students from across the country, like hearing what students in Texas were doing, what students in like Milwaukee were doing, Minnesota, really seeing like the possibility of what I could help grow at my campus, what I could help win. That was really inspired me. Sarah Nelson spoke was really great to hear, you know, like
from the Association of Flight Attendants, the trade union leader, who's, you know, whatever, dynamic, radical leader that, whatever, you know, we've had recently, one of her members was a guest on Fight Back Radio, and it's, yes, it was a good choice by SDS to have her speak, I would think.
Yeah, she was an amazing trade unionist, amazing keynote speaker. And I remember she led us in Solidarity Forever. We sang that at the end.
She has a good voice. Yeah. Not a requirement to be a good trade union leader, but she has one.
Yeah, and it was really, I mean, it really gave me like all these ideas that I hadn't before about what could be possible with just like, you know, the small group of people that I was aware of on my campus. And I think what also just made like a really big impression on me, besides like, you know, these workshops and these speeches, was the second day of the convention, is when chapters put forward resolutions guiding what our organizing should look like for the coming year. And these resolutions ranged all over the place, from like, you know, support for Palestine, you know, that we should defend education and make it, you know, more accessible and equitable, that we should defend women's rights, LGBTQ rights, all sorts of things, but that every single resolution was passed unanimously. Just like made such a huge impression on me, because I was just, I don't know, I was seeing all these things online. I just felt like, oh, everything's like so divided. How can we move forward? And sure, people had like comments, things that they wanted to like fix, you know, it was democratic, but when it came down to it, like, you know, everyone was united. Everyone was like, yeah, this is what we're going to work on. And that just like lifted me out of a pessimism that I, you know, had been really steeped in for a very long time. And so I came back to Chicago from Kent State, energized. I was like, we're going to build this chapter. You know, I might have felt like it wasn't the perfect thing at that time. We were holding all these very small rallies, but, you know, now it's been like several years later, we've tripled in size since then.
Well, can you talk about that a little bit? So I know, you know, the SDS chapter at UIC was struggling for a period of time, and, you know, whatever, even lost its official status. Then COVID had to hurt student organizing across the country, I would think. You know, doesn't surprise me that, you know, you've become the vice president of SDS, because I saw you be part of rebuilding a chapter from one that was in pretty rough shape to a very strong, one of the most vibrant SDS chapters in the country. And so could you talk a little bit how you started to talk about, you know, rallies and stuff, but in the early days when you first joined SDS, or maybe even before that, when you were around it, what kinds of things did you do? What was successful? You know, what was unsuccessful? You know, maybe what kinds of things weren't working as well. But you know, how were you able to do that? And how were you able to keep your spirits positive during that time? You know, I think you know, if something doesn't go well, there's a tendency for people to say, heck with it, this is never work or whatever. So could you talk a little bit about rebuilding the SDS chapter here in Chicago?
Yeah. Let me think. I mean, some of the things that are coming to mind as you were speaking was just like the importance of consistency just made all the difference, that we were out there flyering and talking to students like, you know, multiple times a week, that we were having weekly meetings every single week, that we, you know, weren't afraid to hold speak outs like multiple times a month. And I guess what was like keeping us, you know, grounded at that time is, and this is like such a key part to SDS organizing, is like we had a specific campaign. Now that campaign did like shift over the course of those years. But for the most part, like the main themes remained the same, because these were like the main problems at UIC was just like chronic underfunding of our cultural centers, and a lack of real like institutional and financial support for things like increasing Black enrollment, for like increasing the hiring of, Latino, Black faculty members. UIC is an incredibly diverse school. which they love to, you know, advertise when they're trying to get students to come there. But unfortunately, like, our Black enrollment is at something like 7%, which is crazy in a city that's almost a third Black. And that's the result of, you know, the cutting of programs that used to, you know, very consciously make it accessible for the people living in the community surrounding UIC to attend UIC. Yeah, you know, having a campaign that had specific demands was really important. The cultural centers were just like a really important part of that. And I've seen nationally that like cultural centers are something that students use daily. The staff of cultural centers are who students can really relate to and feel safe with on campuses. And when colleges cut those, whether it be just through like, you know, the funding slowly getting, you know, less, or if they just completely take them away, which we've seen in several states, students really, you know, want to fight to protect those spaces. So that was something that we, you know, really focused on at UIC successfully. So yeah, being consistent and doing the things which maybe feel kind of boring, like meeting weekly, flyering, talking to each other, going outside of our comfort zone and doing rallies even when we just had a few people and it was really cold because it's Chicago and it's awful to stand outside like for a majority of the school year. You know, that consistency and that people saw that we were consistent and we really meant what we were doing, you know, meant that we were able to grow lasting relationships with other student groups and with, you know, sections of the student body as time went on. I also think, like, because there's a good point that you made about, you know, what can keep students motivated, because, yeah, organizing has a lot of ups and downs. Was like that connection to national SDS, I think, really made all the difference. My impression was before we attended that national convention at Kent State, we didn't have a very good grasp on like what was happening nationally. But I think it's really important for students to feel like they're part of a bigger student movement. And that's why we, in National SDS, we call days of action in response to like current events or current policies pretty often, because like that's a big part of our theory of change, is that like students have an action on their campus and it's like coordinated across the country so that we can build something bigger.
Yeah. That's good. Thank you for that. I want to ask you about flyering, actually, because I know that's something, you know, like I mentioned when I was a student, we didn't have electronics, and it's a big part of, I think it's a tool for mobilizing people. That's fantastic. But it doesn't convince people very much, you know, if you're just sending them a flyer. I mean, a electronic
like
thing.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about flyering and tabling, too, actually, as a part of building the chapter and having one-on-one discussions with, you know, just students that may be walking by, and you know, how that fits into what you're doing, and how do you approach those conversations? What thoughts go into tabling or flyering?
Yeah, flyering and tabling is so important, and I think it's a really big mistake for young people nowadays to think that it's like not important. Although like an Instagram page is important, like you should have an online presence. It's a way for a lot of people to find you, but also like the reality of it is like people will only really see that page if they are looking for that page, and the majority of people on your campus aren't going to be doing that. And if they don't see like a poster up in their like lecture hall to go and find your page, then how would they even? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm gesturing with my hands. Yeah, I mean, flyering is kind of uncomfortable. I think it's really smart for chapters to do it, like not just have someone be doing it alone, to like do several people at a time. Don't feel rejected if people don't take the flyer, or if they even don't look at you, especially like everyone's got their AirPods in. Like, don't take offense for it. A lot of people don't mean it in a negative way. And it's good to just like have a very quick phrase that you're saying, like rally for education this Friday or whatever. Like, just like have a quick thing you say, a smile, keep it upbeat. And then if someone like does stop to like ask more about it, you know, be aware of like what your campaign is. If there's like other student groups that are speaking or other professors or something, like maybe see if they know those sorts of things. Yeah, I mean, you just have to be aware that like the majority of people aren't going to want to stop and talk to you, and that's okay. You should be ready for the students who do, and it only takes a few new people. But that exposure is incredibly important. And so like besides like the flyering, like the physical handing out of flyering, it's so important to be printing out and like wheat pasting, putting up on bulletin boards. Be aware of like where the most foot traffic is on your campus. And we've seen like a real like qualitative difference. Like when we print out hundreds of flyers and we're able to get out hundreds, our rallies are so much bigger than on like, you know, events that we like don't print out as much or don't hand out as much.
Well, it sounds like things aren't that different from when I was there.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about tabling as well? I mean, you mentioned the flyering. It seems like there's a correlation there.
Yeah, it is. And usually I recommend that when students are tabling that, I mean, it's ideal to do those things in tandem. Like have like one or two people sitting at a table who can have like, you know, more in-depth conversations with people about your work and your campaign, but also have one or two people who are more mobile, like handing out the flyers and kind of maybe bringing people in, or at least just getting, you know, the paper in their hands so that they can later look at it. I think it's good to do those things together because sometimes if you're just tabling, most people are going to be walking by, or if you're just flyering, you're not able to like actually stop and talk to people because you're trying to get all the flyers out. And I guess like, you know, be prepared for some like people who are coming over just to maybe just like troll you or just like, you know, I don't know, not take it seriously or whatever. Because that will happen. Sometimes people are like that. It doesn't happen super often. But just like, I don't know, almost remain professional. Just be like, yeah, you know, I'm not really here to like debate people. We're just getting the information out about this event. Usually if you're just kind of like, you know, you're not really there to argue with them because you're not going to change their mind. If you make that clear, people will usually just walk away. Yeah,
no, that's good. That's good. I mean, that sounds a lot the same. So generations later. Unfortunately, we're starting to run out of time here, and I've enjoyed this interview so much, and it's uplifting, and it's great to hear that you know, young people are becoming active and becoming leaders like you in the student movement. But you know, whatever, you know, I think setting you know, a spark to the whole country of you know, things that are going on and that we can make things better or different. So thank you for being our guest here. But before we end the interview, I want to give you a chance if there's anything that we haven't talked about that you want to raise or anything you want to highlight here.
I don't know, maybe I would just like stress again, because I think we're really seeing the current upsurge right now is, you know, protest against these mass deportations and especially the role that young people are playing in them. There were really amazing, huge walkouts in LA that lasted like 3-4 days in a row of high schoolers, you know, which obviously like reckon back to like the LA blowouts of like the 1960s, that young people, right now, this is something that they really want to mobilize. And in SDS, we're trying to, you know, coordinate people and give them suggestions for campaigns because we really, really strongly believe that if every university in this country said very clearly to their admin, don't comply with ICE, kick ICE off campus, all students deserve a safe education, that would be a mighty, mighty blow to the Trump administration. So I just really want to like lift that up because I think that that's maybe like the, I don't know, there's so much energy around that right now. I think it's like across students, maybe students that like, you know, weren't active the past like year or so, like it's a very big thing right now.
Okay. And if people want to find SDS, how do they do that?
Yeah, you can find National SDS on Instagram, on Twitter, and our website, newsds.org. Yeah, check us out. look into us, read our resolutions, our points of unity. And if you're interested in building a chapter or affiliating a student group that you already have to, a united national student movement, check us out.
All right. Thank you so much, Erin.
Thanks.
So as you can see, students have been busy and continue to be. And as we head into the spring, this is usually a time for upsurge in the student movement. And so I encourage people to, if you are a student, to contact SDS, to work with them. If you're in an organization, maybe try to affiliate with SDS. If you're in an SDS organization already, my hat's off to you. And I think people, we look to the student movement for a lot, and they've given us energy and spark. And a lot of times, people as they get older, they get set in their ways. They have responsibilities for children, family, grandparents, whatever it is, and it's difficult. And so I want to thank the students for reminding us, being a moral authority as well as energetic energizer for us. So thank you, Erin. Thank you, students for Democratic Society. Also, I mentioned on the last time, I'm going to be getting a Lifetime Achievement Award, the Pete Camerata Lifetime Achievement Award from the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. We're doing a benefit dinner, and that's going to be put in the show notes. So you can, if you're in Chicago, April 26th at 4 o'clock at the Chicago Teachers Union Hall, then please, buy a ticket, stop by. The funds go to Fight Back News and Fight Back Radio. So we've never asked people for money. We've never done a Patreon or any of that kind of stuff. So stop by the dinner, and if you're in Chicago, and I would be happy to meet some of you that I haven't met already, or to re-meet those that I have. So hopefully you can stop by and you can make that. Also, it is a time when we need to be active, whether it's in the struggle for the Palestinians' rights, for peace in the world, for our sisters, brothers, and siblings in the LGBTQ movement. The federal workers' attacks continue. The post office is bound to be the next one on the list, is what the Trump-Musk people are promising. But whatever it is, we need to stand together and fight together. And especially I want to say this May Day, May 1st, is going to be a day for us to unite all around the country, all of our movements, led in many or most places by the immigrant rights movement. But whatever you are, whether it's a trade union, a student, whatever it is, turn out for May Day. Go to a program, go to a march. They're going to be all over the country. And if you don't know where one is in your area, just send an email to Fight Back Radio, and we'll respond with the closest one we're aware of. You can reach us at richard.fightbackradio@gmail.com. And then finally, I just want to, as always, thank our production team, Dodd McColgan, Natalie Pranis, Vince Olson, and Shane Tremley. And I'm Richard Berg for the entire Fight Back Radio team, saying until next time, all power to the people.